One of the interesting sights by the Rebbe was on Yontif, and this is also a lesson in Kibud Aim. The Rebbe's mother would come to shul every Shabbos, and after davening she would go home. Yontif was different. Yontif, after davening, she would walk over to the Rebbe's room and stand outside the Rebbe's room, and the Rebbe, when Musaf was over, would go up the steps, come to his room, and as he walked into his room, his mother would walk in with him. And they stay there for a few minutes, and then they both would come out together, and the Rebbe was still wearing his talis, and they walked from his room to the hallway, to the door of 770. She would walk down further, down the steps. The Rebbe stayed in the doorway, and the Rebbe stayed watching her walk down the steps, turn onto Eastern Parkway, right Eastern Parkway towards Kingston. Then she would turn right on Kingston, and the Rebbe stood the whole time as long as he saw her. And then when she went past the building where you couldn't see her anymore, so then the Rebbe would walk him back into his room. The tziur, the sight was so special because he saw the cover that he gave his mother. The tziur of the Rebbe standing in the doorway of 770, and a lot of people were outside because it was right after davening and people went outside, and they would see the Rebbe with his tallah standing, very serious, looking at his mother walking, following her with his eyes, till he couldn't see her. The malchus the Ketzir that it was, and the respect that he gave his mother that you could see at that moment was something very, very special. And this gave everyone a lesson in Kibud Aim how you have to treat your mother. Two of the things that stopped by the Rebbe after he stopped eating the Yontiv meals upstairs on the second floor of 770 in the Friedrich Rebbe's apartment, after the Rebbe's Nachamedina passed away, was the Fabrengen, the second night of Pesach, and the Maimer, early morning Shavuos at night. The Fabrengen, the second night of Pesach, was different than other Fabrengens. Fabrengen started very late. It was after the Seder. The Rebbe would finish a Seder around 12:30 or something like that, and around 1 o'clock, not always the same time, the Rebbe would come down to Fabreng. There was a much smaller crowd by the Fabrengen because it was late at night. So a lot of the Eltere Yidden was hard for them to come to the Fabrengen, so they didn't come. Also, it was after the Seder by everyone, where they drank 4 cups of wine, and the wine, those years, were all very strong. It's not like nowadays you have some wine which is 4%. Those wines were very strong, so after 4 cups of wine, people were very tired. So many people, Pashut, couldn't hold themselves in, and they would just fall asleep by the Fabrengen. But Bechal was a smaller crowd. Also, there were no children there, because it was late at night, so there was no children, so it was very quiet. And the Rebbe would come into the Fabrengen with his Haggadah, and by the Fabrengen he would explain, in the Siches, different pieces of the Haggadah. And they would sing the Gunim like a regular Fabrengen. And sometimes the Rebbe would even say a Maimer by the Fabrengen. The difference of this Fabrengen was that the Rebbe spoke the whole time with his eyes closed. Like this by the Fabrengens, the Rebbe would keep his eyes open. He didn't look at any person, he looked straight into the air, but he had his eyes open. The only time he closed his eyes was by the Maimer, by the official Maimer, not by a Sir Maimer Esiken Siche, but or Siche Kia Maimer. There he would say it like a regular Nigun of a Siche. But the Maimer, the official Maimer, there he would say with his eyes closed. But Pesach night, the whole Fabrengen, the Rebbe spoke with his eyes closed. And the Pashtasdike reason is because a lot of people fell asleep. They couldn't hold themselves back. So the Rebbe spoke without looking at anybody, without seeing what's going on. And he spoke. Later, the Hanocha was given out. Later, a lot of those sichas were mugi by the Rebbe, etc., and printed in Dagoda, etc., etc. But this was a special type of Fabrengen, which was different than any other Fabrengen in the Tzir Chitzeni, the way it looked Chitzenius. Concerning the second one, which is the Maimer Shavuos, that will be in the next broadcast. When the tziyur of the Maimer, the Rebbe would say Shavuos at night, early morning, was also very unique, very special. First of all, the timing. It was 3 o'clock in the morning that the Rebbe would come in, which means after the Rebbe finished Tikkun, obviously, and after everyone finished Tikkun, everyone was standing in their places, the Fabrengen, and the Rebbe walked in, was very quiet. There was a smaller crowd because it was early morning, and some of the Elteri Eden couldn't come. Most of them did come this time. It's not like Pesach when it was after the Arba cases, etc. After the Seder, here they would come, but there were some that didn't come. The Rebbe walked in, sat down, was very quiet. The children weren't there, so there was no noise at all. The Rebbe sat down. There were no Nigunim sung. sat down quietly, took out his tichel, took out his handkerchief, put it around his fingers under the table, and thought for a moment or two, and then he started the Maimer with the Dibur HaMaschel, as the Rebbe said, as whatever the Maimer was, with the Dibur HaMaschel. And the Maimer used to last for about three quarters of an hour, be'erech at that time. Then as soon as the Maimer was over, the Rebbe got up and left and came to his room, and then he went home. Right after the Maimer, Rabbi Yoel got up and Chazor the Maimer. It's interesting that for this Chazor, Kimat, the whole crowd stayed. But regular Chazor, after a few hours of a Fabrengen, when there was Chazor, so Rabbi Yoel would Chazor, there would be the Chezrim, and there would be other Jungelite, other Bochrim would be there, there'd be a crowd. But this time, the whole Eilam was there. Because it was right after the Maimer. The Maimer was only 45 minutes, and the Eilam was there, so everyone listened again to Chazor of the Maimer. And the Seder was that after Chazor of the Maimer, so everyone went to the mikveh, because Shavuos early morning you go to the mikveh. But Rabbi Yoel and a few of the Chezrim, but after the mikveh, would go to Chazor HaMaimer again. And the Seder was, we'd go to the house of the B'shia Kor for early morning, and there we'd eat blintzes, and Rabbi Yoel would Chazor HaMaimer again. And by the time we finished, it was already close to the time of davening. And Shavuos during the day, there would be other Chazoras also. There would be different people who would Chazor the Maimer for other people. And the Maimer was the living that you lived with the whole time of the Yontev of Shavuos. Shavuos, Tovshin Chavtes, the first night of Shavuos, someone asked the Rebbe, when the Rebbe ate by the Suda upstairs, so someone asked the Rebbe, do other Abbeim say a Maimer early morning Shavuos or Erev Shavuos? Because the person said he never saw a Maimer with that heading. So the Rebbe says, I think that the Tzemach Tzedek used to say, there are Maimorim for the Tzemach Tzedek of that time. You could ask some of the people who are here. So someone said, if the Rebbe doesn't remember, how could they remember? So the Rebbe said, no, they remember good. This was the first day of Shavuos. The second day of Shavuos, somebody said that he saw in the Sicha of the Rebbe from Tovshin Yud Gimel, where the Rebbe says clearly that the Tzemach Tzedek used to say a Maimer, Erev Shavuos, early morning. So then he understood from the Rebbe the other day that the Rebbe wasn't sure, but here see the Rebbe was sure. So the Rebbe said, if I would not be sure, I wouldn't be matriach the Eilam to come and hear the Maimer early morning. But then the person asked the Rebbe that over there, it says that he said it Erev Shavuos. That's what the Rebbe said, Erev Shavuos, not like the Rebbe had Shavuos night. So the Rebbe answered him, when it says Erev Shavuos, it doesn't mean Erev Shavuos, it means Erev Matan Torah. It means the night towards Matan Torah, which is the night of the first night of Shavuos, because Matan Torah was the first day of Shavuos in the morning. But the tzir itself of the Rebbe coming in and saying the Maimer in such a tzir was also very unique, and this was something that everyone was waiting for, because that Maimer, besides the Maimer itself, the people lived with that Maimer more than you lived with Maimorim other times, because here it was Fartog, and then people chazed it once and again and again and again, till Fabringen of Shavuos the second day, where the Rebbe would say a second Maimer, and that was like a regular Maimer of a regular Yontif. A tzir, a site that's engraved in the feelings, in the hearts of many who are Bochrim 770, in the Chovs, probably in the Lameds, is the site when the Rebbe would come from his house while the Bochrim were learning. Monday and Thursday, the Rebbe would come like around 10 o'clock because he came for Kriya. But the other days, like Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, he would come around 11:30, 12, 12:31. I mean, those hours he would come. The door from the Zal upstairs was open to the hallway. So when the Rebbe would come, you were able to see him walk into 770, walk into the hallway. Many of the years, my seat was right there by the door, so I was able to see right away. And the tzira was, whenever the Rebbe came, everybody stood up. It was a special feeling that you were able to give cover to the Rebbe when he came from outside, everybody would stand up. And there was a special feeling that was left, so much so, that up to this day, if we're ever sitting in shul, and some reason they're making a minyan for Kriya or something like that, and they take out the Sefer Torah, and everyone stands up. You're in the middle of a shir, let's say, and then the Sefer Torah is walking by, you stand up. Every time this happens, without fail, what brings back to my mind on the spot is standing up every time the Rebbe walked in. This whole idea that the whole Zal stood up, waited till the Rebbe got into his room, and then everyone would sit down, that is part of our life. And therefore, every time a Sefer Torah walks by and you stand up, that reminds us of the time when you stood up, when the Rebbe came into 770. There was a special feeling that you had then. Rabbi Lieberman, the Rav of Machziki Adas in Antwerp, told me that when he was in Chicago, he was told by a person that person was one of the people in the delegation that came to the Frierdiker Rebbe in Tovshim Beis from Chicago. They traveled special to the Frierdiker Rebbe to invite him to come to visit Chicago. And when they went to Yechidus and they told the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, what they're there for and they want to invite him to come to Chicago, the Frierdiker Rebbe answered that he doesn't think he could go because how could he leave his mother? How could a son leave his mother? So this person says, when the Rebbe said that, he thinking in his mind, the Rebbe himself is not healthy. So what could he do to help his mother if he himself is sick? And the Frierdiker Rebbe felt his machshava, and he said to him, a kranker Zun kann euch helfen der Mame. A sick child could also help his mother. The Poel Mamish, the Frierdiker Rebbe, listened to them, and he traveled to Chicago. There's the famous Bikur Chicago from Tovshim Beis. And Take, at that time, while he was there, that's when his mother had passed away. But Chatchila, he said to them that he doesn't want to leave her because how could he leave his mother? When our family lived in Cleveland, Ohio, so did the family of my uncle, Rav Leibel Yitzchak, Olav Shalom. We lived in an apartment building, both of our families in an apartment building on 105th Street, and across the street was a whole line of stores. One of the stores was the kosher bakery, and they were interested in selling. So my uncle, Rebbe Levi Yitzchok, was ready to buy it. And he spoke to them and negotiated. It looked like it was a going business. It looked like it was worthwhile to buy. So he said he's going to buy it. But he said before he buys it, he wants to ask the Rebbe. So he asked the Rebbe. This was in the beginning of the Yuds, maybe Yudalit, Tesvov. He asked the Rebbe, and the answer came back not to buy it. And everyone was surprised. No one understood. Why not? It seemed like all the things showed that it's a worthwhile deal and it brings profit. Why shouldn't we buy it? But not long after that, the whole side of the street, all the stores caught fire, and they all went up in flames, including the bakery. I remember I went that morning to Cheder, and when I finished Cheder, came home, we couldn't get into our apartment because the flames were still burning across the street, and it was dangerous. And inside the apartment, when the fire started, I wasn't home, I was in Cheder, but the family said, Pasha, you could feel the heat. It was boiling because of the fire across the street, and they had to evacuate. And the store, the bakery, went up in flames. So that's when they understood why the Rebbe said not to buy it, because had he bought it, and then it would go up in flames, I don't know how the insurance would be, I don't know what it would be, it definitely would be a big problem. So we understood why the Rebbe said not to buy it. Reb Zalman Shimon Dvorkin, who was the Rav of Crown Heights, was my father's first cousin. So we used to talk sometimes. So he once told me that when he was learning in Yeshiva in Timchat Mimim in Lubavitch, I think when he was learning Shchita, the Rebbe Rashab told him that he should also learn Nikur. Und das wird dir einmal zu nichts kommen. Nikur is when you have to take out the Gid Anoshe, a certain part of the animal that you can't eat, which is straight, you have to cut out, and the chaylev, the fats, the non-kosher fats, it has to be cut out, and this is not something easy. You have to know exactly which one it is, where it is, and how to do it. It's not simple. So the Rebbe Rashab told him that he should learn how to do this, and he said at the time, this will become useful to you. Years later, this is in the end of the Lamas, I believe, or in the beginning of the Mems, there was a whole tumult in New York concerning Nikur. There were certain shlachtais, there's certain places where they shecht animals that people complained that they don't do the Nikur properly. And there was a whole kuntreisim and writings back and forth against each other, all kinds of things. So members of the Satmar community, of the Rabbanim in Satmar, heard that Reb Zalman Shimon Dvorkin, the Rav in Lubavitch, is a big mumcha, an expert in Nikur. So they decided to come and talk to him about it and learn from him how you're really supposed to do Nikur. And they came to him and he spoke to them and he showed them and he explained to them, etc., etc. So he told me that's when he understood what the Rebbe Rashab meant when he told him that they should learn Nikur und das wird dir amol zu nichts kommen, and this will sometimes be useful to you. Reb Zalman Shimon Dvorkin also told me that when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Leningrad, the Bochrim used to come for Yontif to Leningrad. And when they would come to the Rebbe to Leningrad for Yontif, they would also pay a visit to the Ragachover who lived then in Leningrad. And he says he remembered all kinds of things that the Rakashover used to tell them. First of all, the Rakashover used to be mechabed them very much. When they would walk in, the Rakashover would say, Tmimim. Tmimim would come, so he would give them the greatest covet. For other people, he usually didn't have much patience. But for Tmimim, for Bochim of Tmimim, he would have patience to talk to them. But he told me he once came in, and the Rakashover, they heard him speaking against one of the Achreinim. As we know, he used to speak a lot against the Achreinim. And when he spoke against the Achreinim, so one of them asked him, and what do you say about the Alter Rebbe? So he answered that I can't say anything about him. He was a genius, a goen, and a philosopher. And Rav Zalman Shimon told me he doesn't know exactly what these words mean, a goen, a philosoph, but this is what the Rakashover answered him. A goen, a philosoph. We know that in the year of Tovshin Chavhei, the year of Avelis that the Rebbe had after his mother, the Rebbe would every Farbrengen explain the first and the last Rashi of the Parsha. Then after Tovshin Chavhei, the Rebbe stopped, but then Mr. Waldman was a person, was like a kocht stark in the Rashis, wrote to the Rebbe that the Rebbe should continue. So from Parsha Shmois, Tovshin Chavov, the Rebbe continued and started explaining every Farbrengen, every Shabbos Farbrengen, a Rashi. At one point, the Seder became that the Rebbe would be Meidia the Rashi before, because Mr. Waldman asked the Rebbe that it's kedai that we should know which Rashi is going to speak about, so people could prepare to look up the Mefarshim, etc. So sometimes the Seder was that he would write into the Rebbe before Shabbos what Rashi it will be, and the Rebbe would answer on that settle. But then became the Seder that the Rebbe Shabbos morning, before davening, he would tell him which Rashi. That means that he would stand by the Rebbe's door at the time when the Rebbe would come from his house to 770 before davening, and as the Rebbe would come, before he'd walk into his room, he would tell him which Rashi it's going to be. Actually, sometimes this was the simon that it'll be a Farbrengen, because certain Shabbosim wasn't sure if it'll be a Farbrengen or not, so the Rebbe would come, and if he told him which Rashi it's going to be, we knew it'll be a Farbrengen. And then the Seder was that as soon as the Rebbe told us to Mr. Waldman, somebody would run downstairs and tell Rav Zalman Duchman that the Rebbe gave over that the Rashi today will be so-and-so. And then when the Rebbe came into daven, while the Rebbe was walking into his place, he would make an announcement that today there'll be a Farbrengen and the Rashi is going to be so-and-so. Shabbos Parshas Vayikra, Tovshin Chof Tes, the Rebbe came from his house and did not say a Rashi, because the Rebbe didn't plan to Farbreng, but maybe there was no Rashi. There was a bocher who made a joke to another bocher, and he told him that the Rebbe said that today will be the Rashi Vayikra Beis Hey. The second bocher didn't know any chachmas, didn't know anything. He ran downstairs, told Reb Zalman Duchman that the Rebbe said that today will be Farbrengen, the Rashi will be Beis Hey. So as the Rebbe came into daven, Reb Zalman Duchman made the announcements that Hein to Farbrengen and the Rashi is going to be Beis Hey. When the Rebbe heard this, the Rebbe got very upset. The Rebbe turned around and he said, "Wer hat das gesagt?" Who said this? So they said, a bocher said this. So the Rebbe said, where's the bocher? The Rebbe was standing by his place. The bocher, the second bocher, was downstairs and walked over to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe asked him, who told you this? So he said, another bocher. So the Rebbe let the other bocher come. And you saw the Rebbe was very, very upset. At one of the point, the Rebbe even walked away from the stender, walked over to the end of the carpet, closer towards the people. They went looking for that bocher. The bocher was nowhere to be found, because as soon as the bocher heard that downstairs they made this announcement, he knew it's not Poshet, obviously. He ran into hiding, he ran away. So they couldn't find him. And the Rebbe said, we're not going to start davening till this bocher will come. And the Rebbe was standing facing the Olam, waiting, but they couldn't find him. So finally the Rebbe turned around and made a simon that they should start davening. And they started davening. And you can imagine what kind of tumult this made. Such a thing should happen, that announce a Rasha that the Rebbe didn't say in front of the Rebbe, this is something so terrible, and that got the Rebbe very, very upset. Next Shabbos was Shabbos Parshas Tzav, Shabbos HaGodel. There was a Farbrengen. After the Maimer Ken Siche, the Rebbe started saying that before he's going to go into Rasha, like he always did after the Maimer, he would explain the Rasha. He said, I want to talk about what happened last week. And he said this, what happened is, I'm not going to say over all the details from what he said, because you could look in the Hanochas, you'll find it, but just the points of it, just a few of the points. And the Rebbe said that this is similar to what the Gemara says B'negeya Sukkos, that if it rains on Sukkos, it's similar to a servant, an eved, that poured wine for his master, for the king, and he pours it back into his face. And the Rebbe used this as a mashal for what happened here. And the Rebbe said this was stuck by mistake. No one meant any harm, but nevertheless, this is what happened. And the Rebbe said that really there was no reason to get upset about this. And he quoted what it says in the Geras HaKodesh, that if something bad happens to a person, don't be angry at the person who did it to you, because it was min hashamayim that it should happen to you. The fact that that person has to be punished is because he chose to do something wrong. But as far as the person who got it, it happened to him, has no reason to be angry, because Harbe Shluchel Amokim, the Eibishter could have done it would have done it some other way. But Mela, there was no reason to be angry. And the Rebbe said, actually, for that Shabbos Parshas Vayikro, a new Likud of Likutei Sichos came out, even though it was a year when there were no Likutim, but certain Shabbosim, the Rebbe was Magia Nu Sichos. And the Likud for that Shabbos spoke about this inyan, spoke about this Geras HaKodesh, where the Alter Rebbe says that the Nizik, the one that got the damage, should not be angry at the person who did it to him, because it would have happened anyway, because this is what Eibishter wanted. And the Rebbe said that it was the Likud, the Sicha that from last week. And he said, I learned the Sicha once, I learned it twice, and I even had Hanoah from the Inyanim that's in the Likud. So there was no reason really to get upset. And the Rebbe went on to more details about this whole Inyan. And the bottom line that the Rebbe said was that Lepel, since it happened, it's a Simon min Hashamayim. L'chal, this whole Inyan that he shall announce which Rasha will be, is not something that he saw by the Rabbeim. This is something that more by the Litvish Rosh Hashivas, before a drosha, you give Mara Mekemis, like Shabbos HaGodel, people should prepare, but by the Rabbeim it wasn't done. The whole union of learning Rasha is a Chiddush, but to announce it is certainly a Chiddush. So to stop teaching the Rasha is that he's not going to do. But to him it's a siman that from now on he should stop announcing before which Rasha is going to be. The truth is that later on Mr. Waldman wrote to the Rebbe and asked him to start again, and the Rebbe started again announcing before. But Lepel, this Shabbos, the Rebbe said that from now on, the meantime, he's going to stop announcing the Rashas. And there were many, many more details that the Rebbe said. And afterwards, he said that since Bashgocha Protis Lepel, they made this announcement that the Rasha will be Beis Hey. I don't know if I wasn't Zachonget Shabbat in this Rasha. I don't know why they started up with this Rasha, but Lepel, they announced this Rasha, it's Bashgocha Protis. So the Rebbe went on and explained the Rasha in Vayikro Beis Hey. So this whole thing, which was a negative thing, turned out to be that because of that, we gained the Rebbe Sebir in another Rasha. My older brother, Sholem Ber, is a son-in-law of Rabbi Nissim Mindel, the famous Rabbi Nissim Mindel, who was the secretary of the Rebbe, and he used to go in a few times a week to be dictated by the Rebbe the letters that he has to write. So when my brother had his fourth daughter, and he had no boys, so when Rabbi Mendel went in to get the dictation of the letters, the Rebbe wished a mazel tov for his einikel. So he tells the Rebbe that my daughter, my son-in-law, would like to have a son. They have 4 girls, but they don't have any boys. So they're asking for a bracha, they should have a son. So the Rebbe says, the Gemara zogt, Bas tchila simen yofa lebanim, which means the Gemara says, Bas tchila means if a daughter is first, simen yofa, it's a good sign, lebanim, for the sons. And the Rasha in Gemara explains what it means. So the Rebbe said to him, if you look at the words, so Bas is one word, Tchila is a second word, Simen is a third word, Yofa is a fourth. What comes after that? Lebanim. So after the 4, says with a smile, the 4 girls, Lebanim, will have a son. And that's exactly what happened. The next child he had was a boy, and he had a few more boys, and then he had girls. So the Rebbe's bracha was Mekuyim, but the way the Rebbe put it, based on the words Bas, Tchilo, Simen, Yofe, then comes Lebanim. This year in the yeshivas, we're learning Mesichta Baba Kama, which talks about Niske Momen. If something that belongs to somebody damages, like an ox that belongs to somebody damages, all the dinim around it, the chayvas, what you're chayiv to pay, how much you're chayiv to pay, etc., etc., etc. And this is a shaykhs also to Parsha Mishpatim. And it's known that one of the chkiras that are there in the Sforim, Benegeya Niske Momen, Benegeya, the fact that you're responsible to pay for your property that caused the damage, something that belongs to you caused the damage, the famous chkira, whether the reason is because you didn't watch it and that's why you're responsible to pay? Or is it because it belongs to you and you are responsible for everything that happens through something that belongs to you? That's a chkira that's spoken about in the Svarim. Now, in the Kutas Siches, Chelik Vov, page 329, there's a long letter from the Rebbe in this subject. Very geschmack letter, and he goes to both sides and he explains it in detail and connects it to Yerushalmi. Very geschmack. So I want to explain a little bit the background to this letter. In the year Tovshin Chav Vov, a bocher came to learn Psalm 70. His name was Nochem Zevin. He was a grandson of Harav Zevin, the famous Harav Zevin. He learned the Ponivish actually, but his grandfather convinced him to come at least for 1 year to learn in 770 and be close to the Rebbe. And I got pretty close to him. And he went into Yechidus. And in Yechidus, the Rebbe spoke to him in learning Poshet and Nigla. When out of Yechidus, he wrote to the Rebbe a question, Bekesher, Behemshech, to what he spoke about in Yechidus. And the Rebbe answered him, a long letter, Biksav Yad Kodesh, a long letter, and the page was full, and the Rebbe's Ksav Yad, going into a lot of detail, and this is that letter that we're talking about. I remember that he couldn't read the Rebbe's Ksav Yad. It was hard for him. If you're not used to it, it's hard, and I was used to the Rebbe's Ksav Yad. So I sat down with him. I remember even where we sat, in Cheder Sheni, upstairs in 770, and I copied over, word for word, the letter. Maskiros wouldn't give the letter to Ksav Yad, the original Ksav Yad, to keep or even to make a copy, but to copy it over. So I remember sitting down and copying word from this letter, from the Rebbe's Ksav. I even remember one word that in the beginning we couldn't figure out, but then later we figured it out. And later on, this was printed in Likutei Sichos. But this is the letter that the Rebbe wrote to him as an answer for his question, where the Rebbe describes and explains all these inyonim. After he got the letter of the Rebbe, he sent a copy to his grandfather, Harav Zevin. And Harav Zevin answered him certain things. And he took the letter of his grandfather and sent it into the Rebbe. So on that, the Rebbe answered and wrote other things. So if you look in the Likutei Sichos, the original letter starts on page 329, the middle of the page, goes kimat to the end of page 330. And then after that, there's another 2 paragraphs at the bottom of 330 going up to 331. That is already after the Rebbe saw his grandfather's letter. That's when the Rebbe wrote these things, which is behemshech to the inyonim that's written in this letter. And this letter actually is used by a lot of Rosh Hashivas concerning the Masechta Bava Kama and explaining the different sides of this chkira and answering different questions and explaining Machlekes Rishonim, etc., etc. But the way the Rebbe puts it is mamish brings out the inyan very clear, and through that you could answer a lot of kashas of the Meforshim. The Fabring in the Bachon Shel Pesach Tovshin Lamed, the Rebbe spoke about the Hemshech Samachvov of the Rebbe Rashab, the milas and the specialty of this Hemshech. In Tovshin Lamed Aleph, when Samachvov was printed for the first time, Rabbi Groner asked me if I could prepare the Siche for the Rebbe to be Magia, and they would print it in the back of the Samachvov. So I prepared the Siche, gave it to Rabbi Heshke Dubravsky to be Mesagnen, to make the signet, and it was given into the Rebbe. And the Rebbe was stuck in Magia like he was Magia all the Siches twice. So I just want to mention a few of the interesting things that the Rebbe wrote or changed in the Haggadah of the Siche. There were many things that he wrote, but just to mention a few. Number 1, on top it said, Keta Mesichas Achim Shel Pesach Tovshin Lamed. So the Rebbe added a hey to the word Tovshin Lamed, so it should read, hey Tovshin Lamed, which means hey Alof in Tovshin Lamed, which is not something that we're always makpid to write. Under this line, the Rebbe wrote, Rishimas Echad Hashemim, that this was a Rishima that was written by one of the people who heard it, which we don't find that too often in the Rebbe Siches. We find it more, I think, in the Friediger Rebbe Siches, but by the Rebbe Siches we hardly find it. And here the Rebbe made sure it should say Rishimas Echad Hashem. Then in the beginning of the Siche it says that originally Pnimis HaTeirah, Seides HaTeirah were hidden. Only from the time of the Arizal, that's when he writes that it's Mutter and Mitzvah Legala Zeis HaChochma, yet you have to reveal this Chochmah. But even that wasn't Behispashtas Barachove till the Baal Shem Tov came, and he started to be Megala, and this Chochmah should be Nispashat amongst all the Yidden. So when we wrote Acha Hefia HaBaal Shem Tov, till the Baal Shem Tov appeared, so the Rebbe added the words to the Baal Shem Tov, he added Kveit Kedushas Admur. So it should read Acha Hefia Kveit Kedushas Admur HaBaal Shem Tov. But then the Rebbe crossed out the word Admur. and left it Achehit Kfia Kved Kedushas Baal Shem Tov. So it's interesting that the Rebbe crossed out the word Admur from the Baal Shem Tov. Now, Bepashtas, we thought it was because the word Admur is only written by the later Rabbeim. We don't find in the earlier times, like we don't write Admur HaArizal or Admur on any other people from the earlier generations. The word Admur is started only from, like the Alter Rebbe's time, from the Talmidim of the Magid. That's what we thought. But Lepeil, it's strange, because when the Keser Shem Tov came out in the year Tovshin Lamed Gimel, in the Sharbalat, so it was put together the Loshen on the Baal Shem Tov. So it says there, Adineinu Mereinu V'Rabbeinu. And it's taken from a Loshen of the Frierdiker Rebbe, where he wrote the Ksav Yad Kodesh, where he writes on the Baal Shem Tov, Adineinu Mereinu V'Rabbeinu. This came out in Tovshin Lamed Gimel. This one is in Tovshin Lamed Aleph. Here the Rebbe wrote the word Admur, and then he crossed it out. That's one thing that we have here that's interesting. Then there's another thing that's interesting here, that in the Fabrengen of that Fabrengen, Achen Shel Pesach, the Rebbe said concerning Samach Vov that there is something special here, even more than the other Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab himself, and even the Gabe de Maimorim of the three previous Rabbeim. And the Rebbe mentioned that even though amongst the previous Maimorim Hamsheichim of the previous Rabbeim, you have the Vekocha HaGodel, the big Vekocha, and the Rebbe said this word HaGodel was called by the Nosibi Yisrael, I guess that the Rebbe Rashab, he called it the Vekocha HaGodel. So that proves that it's a Maimer in Gadlis, in Nigla, and in Kabbalah, and in Chassidus. Nevertheless, it doesn't come to the Maila of the Giluyim that in the Hemshech of Samach Vov. Till the Rebbe said, you could say that the Hemshech Bekocha, Legabe Samach Vov, is like Nister Legabe Nigla, or Teresh B'Ksav Legabe Teresh B'Alpeh. And the Sikha that was prepared for the Rebbe to be Magia, this was written there amongst the Inyanim of the Maila of Samach Vov. And when the Rebbe was Magia, the Rebbe crossed out this whole Inyan. This whole Inyan that this is greater than the Maimorim of the other Rebbeim before, and includes the Vekocha HaGodel, the Rebbe crossed that out. Then when it came to the second Hagoah, and the way the Sikha finished, at the end it said that we should be Zeiche to the Aschalte de Gula, and to the Shleimas HaGula, Amitis of the Mashiach Tzidkenu. That's how the Sikha finished. So in the second Hagoah, the Rebbe added, Bimheiro B'Yameinu Mamish, and made a dat, Omen Ken Yerotzen with a dat. So the Rebbe added that it should not just finish Gula Amitis Vashlema de Mashiach Tzidkenu, but it should finish with Bimheira B'Yameinu Mamish and Omen Ken Yerotzen. In Tishrei Tovshin Lamed, a lot of the Bochrim who came from France, from Brunois, and from Montreal, decided that they don't want to go back to their yeshivas. They want to stay to learn the 770 by the Rebbe. So, or they themselves wrote to the Rebbe, or Dan Holos wrote to the Rebbe. But anyway, the Rebbe gave over through Rebbe Yomen Klein that he wants to call them into Yechidus and talk to them. So on the second day of Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, Rebbe Yomen was going around to different Bochrim who from that group and told them that the Rebbe wants to talk to you and you should be ready to go into Yechidus tonight. So that night, the group, a big group, went into the Rebbe, and Rebbe Yoel Khan, who was the Chayzer, also went into the Rebbe, and since I had a shaykhs to Chazar, I also went in, even though I wasn't part of that group. We went into the Rebbe, a big group, and it was pretty full, and we came in and closed the door, and I just remembered, by the way, that so it was crowded, so somebody rubbed his back on the switch of the light, and the light went off. It took a few moments till they found the switch, and they opened the light again. And I remember when they opened the light again, the Rebbe looked towards the switch and the people who were standing there, and I happened to be standing there because since I wasn't part of the group, so I stood in the back. I stood by the door, and the Rebbe looked at that place, looked at me, but then he started talking, and the Rebbe started explaining that it says in Chassidus a moshel for the neshama coming down to the guf from a king who wants his son to get the most of his potential, so he sends him away to a far place where there are hardships, and when he overcomes his hardships, that he uses his koiches, all his potential, to its best, and he reaches a much higher madrege. Same thing with the neshama coming down, even though the neshama is in a very high madrege, but the Eibush sends it down to this world, so here it goes through hardships and overcomes the hardships, it reaches a higher madrege. And the same thing is with Yidden going into Golus. That the reason the Eibush send Yidden into Golus, so when they overcome the hardships, they reach a higher madrege than before. And the Rebbe said that's the reason why the Rabbeim, starting from the Baal Shem Tov, would send their Talmidim to different places, and it wasn't chas v'sholom a punishment or a rejection. It was he wants them to reach a higher madrege by working over there, helping others, and overcoming all the hardships. They themselves reach a higher madrege. And the same he said is b'negei the Bochrim, that learn out of New York, outside of New York, and they're sent to learn other places, it's not chas v'sholem because of a chesaron, but adarab, but they are the ones that are chosen because they have the special keiches to overcome the hardships, and they themselves reach a higher madrege. So a long siche, and it was a great hisrakshis amongst the bochrim that were there. And obviously we understand that the bochrim did not stay in New York. They all went back to their places because the Rebbe made them actually shluchim and explained that this is all for their benefit, and these are special bochrim that have this shlichus upon themselves. Now, a while later, Reb Isaac Shvei, who was one of the Rosh Yeshiva in Montreal, came over to me and he said he would like to give in to the Rebbe the Sikha to Magia, and then he would print it as a Hagdome to one of the Sefer HaPilpulim, or as they would call it, Pilpul HaTalmidim that Montreal gave out. He would put it there, if I could prepare it. So I remember I prepared the Sikha, gave it to him, and he worked on it. He himself was Masagd in it. He worked on it himself, and he gave it into the Rebbe. And the Rebbe was Magia it. And Take, in the Pilpul HaTalmidim that he gave out in Montreal in the year of Tovshin Lamed Gimel, this Sikha is printed there. And there, in the beginning, when it starts off by saying the heading Sichas Kvegdushad Murshliter, it says under it Hatokas Mirshimas Hashemim, that this is a copy of written down by those that heard it. If I remember correctly, I think the Rebbe, when he was Magia, added that line, which usually it's not there. He added that line that's Hadokas Mirshimas. I think so. Now later on, the Sikha was printed in Lekut Siches Chelik Yudalit in the Hisofis to Chai Elul. But it's taken all from the Kuntres of Montreal, the Pilpul HaTalmidim that they gave out in that year. I had a friend still from Cleveland that learned as a bocher in Ner Yisrael in Baltimore. So he told me that he had a friend in the yeshiva there that became a chosen. And even though he himself was a Litvisher, had no shaykhs to Chassidim, to Lubavitch, but his future father-in-law had some shaykhs to Lubavitch, and he wanted that the chosen Kala should go into the Rebbe before the chasna for a bracha. So he agreed to go into Yechidus. But he prepared a kasha to ask the Rebbe in Gemara. So he prepared a kasha in Mesicht in the Dorim and Aran in the Dorim to ask the Rebbe when he goes in. So he told my friend that he went in, and after the Rebbe gave him the bracha, he asked the Rebbe the kasha, and on the spot, the Rebbe Bekitzer explained to him the whole sugya and answered the kasha on the Ran. And he was very nispol. He came out, he said it was amazing how he learned this Gemara now and looked into it and had this kasha, and the Rebbe off the cuff explained to him the sugya and answered the kasha. So he saw the great gainus of the Rebbe. In the winter of Tovshim Mem Dalet, when the Satmar Rebbe Rebbe Yoel was here in Miami, I had a few meetings with the leadership, with Rabbi Yosel Ashkenazi, who was his gabbai, and some other leaders of the Satmar community, concerning the relationship and the behavior of Satmar towards Lubavitch. And after every such meeting, I would call Rabbi Chadakov and give him a report of what took place. At one of these calls, Rabbi Chadakov tells me, I want you to know for your information that before the Satmar Rebbe went to Miami this year, he called in the Rosh Yeshiva, who at that time I think was somebody by the name of Meisels, and he told him that they should stop any negative behavior towards Lubavitch. So he says, I want you to know that when it comes to speak to these people. So I said to Rabbi Chadakov, it's hard to believe that this happened, knowing the health situation of the Satmar Rebbe. Because where he used to stay was not far from my house, so I used to daven Friday night sometimes at that minyan. So I saw that it was after his stroke, and I saw that I didn't think it was possible for him to arrange this because of his health situation. So Rabbi Chadakov tells me, no, this is what happened. So he again started saying, but I don't see how this could be. And he tells me again, and we were like arguing. All of a sudden, I heard the Rebbe's voice. Obviously, the Rebbe was on the phone, and he says these words, Was is negeya die ganze Dinge nicht? Was is negeya die ganze Dinge nicht? What's the point of this whole argument? What's the point of this whole argument? As soon as I heard the Rebbe's voice, I jumped off of my chair, I put on my surtuk and I put on my gartel, and I stood listening. And I didn't argue, obviously, anymore. I didn't say a word besides the questions that I was asked. But it seems like the Rebbe was trying to say, why are you arguing? Accept it, you're told, and don't argue. And from that point on, I didn't, discuss anything, like a dispute or anything that Rabbi Chadukov said, and I just got guidance in what to do. Now, whether this fact came up in discussion by the next meeting or not, I don't remember. But the Rebbe definitely was trying to say, it seems like that don't argue and accept it. If you're told, you have to accept it. When I told over my conversation with Rabbi Chadukov and the Rebbe was on the line, so I have to make a correction that I didn't remember the date, the year when it was. I just, in my mind, made some calculation, and it came out that it was Tov Shin Mem Daled. But really, I miscalculated, and it wasn't Tov Shin Mem Daled. It must have been Tov Shin Lamed Vov or Tov Shin Lamed Zayin. Sorry for that. Once, when my older brother Shalom Ber went into Chassidus with my father, and he was a boy after Bar Mitzvah, when they walked in, the Rebbe looked to the jacket of my brother, and as they walked in, the Rebbe says to him, Farvos verspillst du nicht den Pinjak as wie der Tate, rechts auf links. Why don't you button your jacket like your father, right over left? Because his jacket was the regular jacket that buttoned left over right. And then he added, Adu wirst kommen heim, sollst du sagen dem Amen, also sollst du nehmen a Nodel und zunähen a Knäppel auf dem anderen Seite, kdei das allemal kann sein verspillet rechts auf links. When you come home, because we lived in Cleveland, so he said when you come home, you'll tell your mother to take a needle and sew a button on the other side of the jacket, so you'll be able to button it. It always will be right over left. And obviously, it's exactly what happened when he came home. That's what he told my mother, and she made a button on the other side, and from then on, he buttoned from right on left. There was a bocher in 770, when I learned in 770, who asked the Rebbe Shaila if it's important that he should put on Rabbeinu Tam's film right after davening, before he goes to eat breakfast, or he could do it after he eats breakfast. And the Rebbe answered him that it's kedai v'nochein, it's the right thing to do to put on Rabbeinu Tam's film right after davening, because then it's still connected to the bracha that you made on Rashi's film. And even though there is a hefsek between the bracha on Rashi's film and the Rabbeinu Tam's film, the hefsek is in the middle that you davened, but it's not the same, the hefsek of davening to the hefsek of eating. So you should put it on before. And then the Rebbe wrote, if it's not possible, then you could put them on a whole day. When the Sefer HaMinhagim was being prepared by Rabbi Groner for the Rebbe to be Megia, to be printed, so I remember I came over to him and I gave him the zettel, because his bocher gave me a copy of the zettel. So I mentioned it to him and I gave him the zettel. So he took the zettel and he wrote it as one of the Minhagim in Sefer HaMinhagim. But I remember the Rebbe changed a few words. In the original zettel that he wrote, he said that the hefsek of davening is not the same as the hefsek of eating and drinking, etc., something like that. And here the Rebbe changed and he said that that it's not the same, the hefsek of davening to the hefsek of regular things, ordinary things, not holy things. And Bepashtas, the reason is because he asked the question of whether he should put it on right after davening before breakfast or after breakfast. So the Rebbe mentioned that the hefsek of eating is worse than the hefsek of davening. But maybe they should put it on before breakfast. But when it was printed in the Sefer HaMinhagim, it has nothing to do with eating. It's a general shaila. Should he put it on right away or could put it on later? So here the Rebbe changes to a general expression that the hefsek of tefillah is not the same as the hefsek of inyan chayil, of ordinary things. But Pashtas, that's the reason why the Rebbe changed it. When we moved to Miami, there was a Rav here by the name of Rabbi Meisels, a Hungarian Rav, who had moved from Chicago. He lived many years in Chicago, and he moved to Miami when his health needed it because he couldn't stay in a cold weather, cold climate, so he had to move to Miami, so he moved to Miami. And he told me that after the war, he moved to Chicago and opened a shul there. But after a while, he felt very, very uncomfortable. There were no Hamish Yidden there. They were really mostly not from Eden. And he felt very, very uncomfortable, and he wanted to move to New York. So he went into the Satmar Rebbe, Rebbe Eilish, and he asked him whether he should move back to New York. And the Satmar Rebbe told him not to move back to New York, but to stay in Chicago. After a while, a year or two, I don't know how much, he again felt that he wants to move for the same reason. So he went back to the Satmar Rebbe, and again he asked him if he could move back to New York. And he said no. He said, don't move back to New York, stay in Chicago. After a while, he said he decided he's going to ask the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's going to ask the Frierdiker Rebbe. So he went to New York, and he went to Zichronos of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he told him his whole story, and he told him what's going on in Chicago, and he told him that he wants to move to New York because he feels uncomfortable, etc., etc. So these are the words he says that the Frierdiker Rebbe said to him. Ayid tornit sein kin kofoi teva. Der Rebbe hat euch geholfen und geraten wird bei der Milchome, darf dir sehen helfen andere Jiden. Which means, the Frierdiker Rebbe said to him, a Yid is not allowed to be ungrateful. If Hashem helped you and saved you from the war, you have to also now help other Yidden. So obviously he stayed in Chicago, he stayed there for many, many years, but when the doctor said that he has to move to a warm climate, that's when he moved to Miami. But otherwise, the words of the Frierdiker Rebbe stayed with him, and he said that he cannot be a Kofri Teva, and the Eibishter helped him, so he has an obligation to help others. Bichlal, the Rebbe did not speak about what is going on in the higher heavens in Shamayim. Nevertheless, I want to mention two of the times when the Rebbe did. One of the times is when a bocher from our Kitte, the bocher Yankiv David Katlarsky, Olav Sholem, who's a brother of Ramesha Katlarsky, Zolzain Gesund und Stark, passed away. It was Friday night, Shabbos Parsha Shmeis. He learned in Montreal then, and there he tried very hard to arrange that the bochrim shouldn't have to go to eat the Suda Shabbos by Balabatim, so he finally arranged that they'll have the Suda Shabbos in Yeshiva. And the first Shabbos that he arranged that, after a meal, when he went to sleep, Rahman al-Aslan, he didn't wake up. Shabbos after that, his father went over to the Rebbe by Fabrengen and gave a bottle of mashke le'ilu nishmosei. And the Rebbe took the mashke, poured into his cup, gave it to him, said l'chaim v'livrocha, and then the Rebbe said, and everybody could hear, sitzt jetzt in Gan Eden und hört Chassidus vom Schwer. The Rebbe said he's sitting now in Gan Eden and listening to Chassidus from the Frierdiker Rebbe. So besides the fact that the Rebbe is saying things that are going on Lamaila, saying that he's sitting in Gan Eden, there's another Pella here. I heard from Reb Peretz Mochkin and from other Elter Chassidim also who were in Lubavitch, the Mashpia there, one of the Mashpiyim was Reb Hendel. And when the Reb Hendel passed away, not many months after that, the Rebbe Rashab said by a Fabrengen, as Hendel kreyet jetzt shein in Gan Eden. Hendel in Yiddish means a chicken. When the chicken crows in Yiddish, it's called kreyen. So he used the expression, it was a loshen nefel loshen, it's a loshen that fits to a chicken, but he used that loshen because his name was Hendel, and he's Hendel kreyet shein in Gan Eden. That Hendel already is now crowing in Gan Eden. And the Peretz told me that all the Chassidim were very surprised because we learn in Svarim that it takes a long time from when the Neshama leaves this world till the Neshama gets to Gan Eden. And here it was not so long, and nevertheless the Rebbe Rashab said that he's already in Gan Eden. Now there it was, I don't know how many weeks, but here it was mamish just a week, and the Rebbe said that he's already in Gan Eden. That's one time. And another time, something similar to this, was when Repinya Altois passed away in Eretz Yisrael. Passed away on Tes Ir, Tovshin Chov Gimel, and Yud Beis Tammuz, which is just a little bit over 2 months later, the Rebbe by the Fabrengen of Yud Beis Tammuz, in the middle of the Fabrengen, said that one of the people that had a share, a chelik in the gul of the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was mishtadel and tried to work on the union of the Frierdiker Rebbe being freed from jail, is given Pinye. That's the way the Rebbe said, is given Pinye, and when he said that, he choked up, he was crying, and because he was close to the Rebbe, the Bala Simcha V'Agula, Mistame is Fabrengen there now with the Fabrengen of Yud Beis Tammuz. And since there is a nigun of his, that he used to sing, and Mistame people here know that nigun, so should sing this nigun Varikesel Lochem Brocha. And then the Rebbe said, Mistame vete dort mitsingen, that probably he will sing along over there in the higher worlds. So here too, the Rebbe said, a little bit over 2 months after he passed away, that he's already sitting by a Fabrengen Yud Beis Tammuz L'maylo, and also the Rebbe said that he will sing along with when we sing Harikesel Lochem Brocha. So this is also a pele, two things that the Rebbe Bechal is speaking about what's going on L'maylo, and also that already so soon he's in such a place that he's Fabrengen with the Fabrengen of Yud Beis Tammuz. I remember once when the Rebbe davened upstairs, it was Mincha or Ma'ariv, I don't remember which one. The Rebbe noticed in the middle of davening that one of the people there took his finger and stuck it into his ear and cleaning his ear. So the Rebbe from far motioned to him. He made two fists, and he motioned putting one fist over the other and then the other fist over this one, which is a symbol of having to wash. Like when you take a kvort and you wash one hand and then you wash the other hand. So the Rebbe made that sign to him, telling him that if you put your hands in your ears and you clean your ears, you got to wash your hands, especially if you're in the middle of davening. But this is what the Rebbe did. He made a sign like this as if you're washing, and he showed it to him that he should go wash his hands. Reb Shmuel Levittin told me that he used to cross sometimes Eastern Parkway in the middle of the street, not by the corner where there's a light. And I believe it means when he used to stay in his son's house, Rebbe Binyamin, across the street in the building across 770. So when he used to cross, so sometimes he used to cross in the middle of the street. So he told me that the Friediker Rebbe told him, as ich sitze beim Fenster, und ich sehe, wie du gehst über die Gas, fällt bei mir aus der Herz, und befragt Shabbos, which means that when I see you crossing the street, I'm sitting by the window and I see you crossing the street, the middle of the street, and obviously because cars are coming and it's dangerous, my heart falls out. It's an expression in Yiddish, which means I get nervous, and especially on Shabbos. I think that's the Lashon he said, Falt b'mer with the heart, something like that, that I get very nervous, and especially on Shabbos. And he said that what's the difference Shabbos? Because Shabbos, there's another thing there probably, because you sometimes make the car stop or slow down, especially sometimes the car could be a Yid driving, so certainly you shouldn't do it. But Bechlal, he said that when you cross the street in the middle of the street, so the Rebbe said, I get nervous, and he told him not to do it. One of the interesting things that Rebbe spoke about was on Achim Shel Pesach Tovshin Lamed, and then afterwards Shabbos Parshas Achrei, Shabbos Mavorchim Ir Tovshin Lamed. And that was Benegei the Shpoler Zayde. On Achim Shel Pesach, the Rebbe said that there is a meaning to sing the Shpoler Zayde's Nigen on Achim Shel Pesach, the Nigen of Hop Kazak. And the Rebbe went on to explain what's the connection between the Shpoler Zayde and Pesach. And he said the Shpoler Zayde was known for his exceptional Avos Yisrael. We know that he said that when he was a child, the Baal Shem Tov put his hand on his heart, and since then my heart became a warm heart. That means he had a lot of Avos Yisrael. And we know that Pesach has a Shaychus to Avos Yisrael. The Eibishter took us out because the Eibishter loved the Yidden. Also, we know that the Shpoler Zayde was involved in Pidyon Shvuyim, in redeeming captives. That's connected to Pesach, because Pesach, the Eibishter redeemed us from our captivity in Mitzrayim. Also, it's known the Shpoler Zayde did many great miracles, Nisim, beyond nature completely. That's connected to Pesach, because Pesach is Azman Nisim. And that's why on Pesach we sing a Nigun of the Shpoler Zayde. When the Rebbe was talking about the Nisim that is connected to the Shpoler Zayde, he said another thing. We see a type of Nes that has to do with the Shpoler Zayde. There are people who don't believe in anything that's beyond nature. They don't believe about people being able to see the future and things like that. Tzaddikim, they don't believe in that. So concerning the Shpoler Zayde, we find something clearly like that. There is a sefer called Roz HaMalach, which actually the name of the sefer is Reish Zayin Yud Aleph Lamed HaMalach. But the Rebbe said he doesn't say the full name because we should say the name of a Malach if it's not a common name. Therefore, he didn't say that full name. And in that sefer, we have a tefillah of a person called Leib Ben Sora asking Hashem that Hashem should give him Psichas HaMeichen in Torah, open his mind in Torah. And there is no famous person in history besides the Leib Soras, which is the Shpoler Zayde. And B'meila, here we see something that's written there before the Shpoler Zayde was born, because the Sefer was printed before the Shpoler Zayde was born, and certainly it was in Ksav Yad before the Shpoler Zayde was born, hundreds of years, and it's written about something, about somebody that was born many years later, about Reb Leib Soros, which was a Shpoler Zayde. So here we see a clear proof that there is such a thing, that people, or there are things that written about the future, not like those people who don't believe in such things. After Yontif, Shaila was written to the Rebbe. Reb Leib Soros seems to be a different person than the Shpoler Zayde. Reb Leib Soros is one person, and there are stories, a story how Reb Leib Soros was born, the whole Arichas, what happened there. Then there's another story about the Shpoler Zayde connected to the Baal Shem Tov, how the Shpoler Zayde was born with the Bracha of the Baal Shem Tov. They're two different people. Besides that, their mother's name is different. The Leib Sora's mother is obviously Sora, and the Shpoler Zayde's mother has a different name. How could we say they're the same person? So Shabbos after that, Shabbos and Vorchim, The Rebbe spoke about it. And the Rebbe said that concerning what I said, Achon Shapesach, people asked, how could I say that from what it says in Rosa Malach, Leib ben Sora is the Shpoler Zayde? So the Rebbe said like this. Mistaber, he says, it makes sense that they're the same person. Because first of all, we know very little about the life of both of them. The little bit that we do know is that they did a lot of Meifsim. We know they were part of the Tzadikim Nestorim, from the Talmidei Amagid. We know they had the Shaykh Chassidus Baal Shem Tov. And we know that the Nisim that they did both is all concerning Melochim, concerning kings. Leiv Melochim V'Sorim B'Yad Hashem, but it's concerning kings. So it's all the same. So it seems like Be'emes that's really one person. They asked the Shaila that there it says that the name of his mother is Sora, and we know that the name of the mother of Shpoler Zayde is something else, a different name. So the Rebbe said that's no raya, because we find sometimes, or because she had two names, and sometimes we use this name, sometimes we use this name, and Bechlal, it's no raya from the fact that sometimes the name says different, doesn't prove. And he says that even Benegeya Rebbe Lev Yitzchak Bar Ditchever, who is definitely famous, and people know the name of his mother, nevertheless, sometimes we find a different name. And the Rebbe said that the Kavnoki writes that he saw a kameya that comes from the Baditchever, and then the Baditchever's mother's name is different than the one that's known. So we see that from there it's no raya. And therefore the Rebbe said, until we find out for sure that they were two separate people, I assume that they were the same people. The same person. And then the Rebbe said, unless an Ish Neman, a trustworthy person, will come and say that he himself saw two kvorim, two graves, and two matzeves in two different places, for sure, they're two different people, then we'll know they're two different people. But till then, we could assume that they're the same person. Everyone was shocked after the Rebbe said this, because everyone knew that there are two stories and two things of Reb Leib Soros and Shpoler Zayde. I remember that Ramesh Aaron Gaisinski, who is a direct Einikl from the Shpoler Zayde, is known to be an expert in the life of the Shpoler Zayde. He was Uis Mensch. After he heard this, he couldn't digest it. I mean, how could you say they're the same person when he knows the tradition of family, that it's not like that, but what the Rebbe said. Now, they say that there are people who did see two kvorim and two matzeves. So according to that, it seems that Take Be'emes, they're two different people. But it's no stira Be'emes to what the Rebbe said, because for sure, Beruchnius, they are the same inyan. And we find that in Svarim before, especially in Kabbalah, B'negeya Tanoim, V'Amaroyim, that sometimes we say that two people are related, they're the same person. Some people say they're not the same person, they argue. And the reason is because in Kabbalah, they see that this is the same inyan. So to them, it's the same person. Now sometimes that, even though they're the same minyan and they have the same madreges or whatever we have in Kabbalah, Begashmi, as it turns out that they're two different people. Sometimes when there are two names that we find, and really they're the same person. So in this case, for sure, that Iruchne Sanyonen, the Shpoler Zayde and Reb Leib Soros are the same minyan. Now, as long as we don't know Begashmi that they're two different people, so the Rebbe said they're the same person, because they're the same minyan. If we find out, so then no Begashmi that there were two people, but both are the same minyan and both have the same Ruchnes Dike Madrege, whatever that shall mean. We have no Hasogi in these inyonim, but for sure that their Madrege and their inyan is the same. In one of the Fabrengens of Tishrei Tovshin Chov Beis, the Rebbe asked one of the guests from Eretz Yisrael, the Rebbe Avram Lieder, who was a Balmanagan, a Chazan, that he should sing a nigun from Eretz Yisrael. The way we refer to it, he should sing a nigun with Zimras Ha'oretz. Zimras Ha'oretz is a Loshen and Posik, Benegeya something else, but it's also used when you talk about the nigun that comes from Eretz Yisrael. You could use the Loshen Zimras Ha'oretz, because the word Zimras, even though Chumash it means something else, but it also has the word Zemer. So the Rebbe said to him, he should sing the Zimras Ha'oretz. So he started singing the nigun, Ashreho Amsheh Kocholei, that nigun, and people started helping him. But the Rebbe stopped in the middle and asked him, where is the nigun from? What's the makir of the nigun? I don't remember exact wording, but the Rebbe started questioning about the nigun. And he answered the Rebbe that in Eretz Yisrael, by Yaakov, as they sing it in all the shuls. But the Rebbe made with his hands, and he wasn't happy, like he didn't accept it. And if I remember correctly, I'm not 100% sure, I think he said that next time when I ask him to sing, he should sing a different nigun. Came to the Fabrengen of Chovtes Tishrei, that year, Tovshin Chov Beis, which was like a Tzeischam L'Sholom to the Orchim. So in the beginning of the Fabrengen, the Rebbe asked him to sing a nigun from Eretz Yisrael. So then he started singing the nigun, Kad Yasvun Yisrael. Kad Yasvun Yisrael, V'oskin B'simchas Teiro. and he sang it once and again, and the Rebbe was sitting, vertracht, very serious, and listening to the nigun. And listening to the nigun, and people were singing, and he sang it over again, and listening to the nigun. After they finished the nigun, the Rebbe said to sing Yeshia Samecha, and the Rebbe continued with the Farbrengen. Now, many times when the Rebbe would ask him to sing a nigun that he brought from someplace, that would become the nigun that the Rebbe would ask to sing throughout the year, and became one of the nigunim of Lubavitch. Now, we didn't know, it wasn't clear in the Rebbe's face whether he was happy with this nigun or not. He didn't say anything. So we were thinking maybe during the year the Rebbe will ask to sing that nigun again. The Peil Mamish, as far as I know, not that year, not any time later did the Rebbe ever ask to sing that nigun again. So, I don't know exactly why. Shasmais, it wasn't clear that he wasn't happy with it. But Lepeil, it seems like it wasn't his kabel, and from then on, we never sang that nigun. Rebbe Abba Pliskin was a very Chassidish Reed. He actually was a close chaver to Rebbe Mendel Futterfass. And he lived in Australia. And then he moved from Australia to New York. So I once heard him by Farbrengen say over that when he came from Australia to New York and he went into Yechidus, the Rebbe told him that he should Farbreng from time to time with the Bochrim. And I don't know if he asked himself, the Rebbe, what he should talk about, or the Rebbe himself told it to him, but the Rebbe said to him that he should tell stories mainly of Chassidim more than of the Rabbeim. And the Rebbe explained why. Because if you tell over a Hanhogi of one of the Rabbeim, then it doesn't make such an impression, doesn't make such an impact, because the people think to themselves, Avad, the Rebbe could do that. Can I expect it from me? So in Mele, it doesn't really make an impression that it brings out what you have to do. But if you tell over an Hoge of a Chosid, showing it Aveda of a Chosid, and the Chosid is only a Chosid, so then it makes an impact that the person thinks, well, if that Chosid could do it, I could also do it. And if it's expected of him, it's also expected of me. So therefore he told him that he should tell over mainly stories of Chassidim more than of the Rabbeim. And that's actually what he did, that he used to tell over stories from Chassidim. The Hagoes Vitziyunim that Rabbi Groner wrote to the Alter Rebbe Siddur, to the Siddur and Dach, the Siddur and Chassidus, was mugi by the Rebbe. I actually saw the pages of the Hagoes of the Rebbe. Rabbi Groner B'Shaite showed it to me. So concerning what it says in the Siddur, that when it comes to Krishma, there are 245 words. We're missing 3 words to the cheshbon of 248, which is Ramach. And therefore, the meaning is that the Chazan repeats the 3 words, Hashem Alekechem Emes, and the people who hear these words, those 3 words add to the cheshbon of Ramach words. So in the Agos V'Tziyunim it says that Misha Eimed Be'emtze Krishma Keshashatz Messiah Hashem Alekechem Emes. If someone is holding the middle of Krishma, when the Chazan says out loud the 3 words Hashem Alekechem Emes, Yafsik, he should stop. The Yishman, he should listen. And this will count to him to the cheshbon of the 248 words that he needs to have. And there is no maramokim to this. It just says a maramokim where they talk about it. But no maramokim from where this comes from. I heard that in Tovshin Yud, somebody asked the Rebbe the Shaila, and the Rebbe told him this, that he should stop in the middle of Krishma where he's holding, and listen to the 3 words, and that will count for him as if he had the 3 words. And probably this is where Rabbi Groner took it from. Then in the Sefer HaMenhagim it says something similar, almost the same thing, in different words. There it says like this: Gam zeh she'adayin leikora Krishma, even this person that adayin leigomar Krishma, he didn't finish his Krishma, meitzeitzi hashaz b'mirosei Hashem Alekechem Emes. So the Chazan is meitzi him with the saying of the 3 words Hashem Alekechem Emes, and it says in parentheses Hainu shemashlim la mispalel gimel tevis. That means that he gives the one that davened as if he said the 3 words Kivin shezeu be'eis amirosei Krishma. Since the 3 words that the Chazan said is in middle while he's saying Krishma, that's why it counts. And here there's a maramokim that this comes from a letter of the Rebbe. And it doesn't say where the letter is printed or where it comes from. Now, besides the difference in the expressions, but that's not a main difference, there's another difference here. In the Hagos Vitziyunim, which was mugi from the Rebbe, it says that he has to stop where he's holding in the middle of Krishma and listen to the 3 words. Here, it doesn't say that. It doesn't mention that he has to stop. As a matter of fact, it seems that he doesn't have to stop, because he gives a reason why is it good enough Kiv mishazeu be'eis amirase krishma, since it is at the time when he says krishma, is mashman that he doesn't stop. So the shaila is, in the Hagos V'Tziyunim of the Siddur, which was mugi from the Rebbe, it says that he should stop. And here, it doesn't say that he has to stop. And it's even mashmo is that he really doesn't have to stop. And this was also mugi from the Rebbe. They were both mugi from the Rebbe. So we have to think, do you have to stop? B'shas the Chazan says Hashem Elokeichem Emes in order to have these three words count for your cheshbon, or you don't have to stop. In other words, is what it says in Sefer HaMenhagim, as if Madura Basra, this is the bottom line, that you don't have to stop. Or maybe even in Sefer HaMenhagim, it doesn't mean you don't have to stop. He just didn't mention it, but it also means that. You have to look into this.